2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.
Now, Tuesdays would not be complete without Professor Jim Jost joining us from the world of politics. It is a big, crazy world, Jim.
And good morning, Mark.
Yeah, good morning. And today we're going to talk about something that gets a lot of pollies in a bit of trouble from time to time, political donations.
Yes.
And this is not just a case of, can you put another 50 in the envelope for the team? This is where they really get sort of caught up in the world of fraud even.
Well, yeah, it can be quite complicated, and occasionally political parties find themselves in a bit of hot water because they haven't quite followed the due process,
and sometimes their own rules, party rules.
Yes, and sometimes they've worked hard to avoid the rules. But for the most part, I mean, the Electoral Commission requires that donations to political parties be recorded and declared. And they have a couple of categories. The main one is donations, and another one is simply called other, which is not strictly, it's not about donations, but it's about forms of income that the party gets that comes from other sources. Now, most of these get declared, but then there are various schemes that parties come up with to find ways and means where the amount can be hidden, shall we say, or not necessarily declared. So the source of some funding is not there.
Kind of circumventing the rules a little bit. Have there been examples recently that you can cite for us?
Well, yes. I mean, there's one curious one about the plane for Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Whether that was a donation or not, it seems to be very unclear. It's owned, at least as far as we can determine, it's owned by James Ashby, the director of the party. He claims that he purchased it and he's just using it for the party's benefit, but there's a grey area here when it comes to if you're using a resource for the benefit of the party, is that a donation or is that something that should be declared and the money value of that declared so that it's clear and transparent? That is very grey. I mean, the reason that the Electoral Commission and the political system wants this transparency, and why I think the general public want it as well, is that people want to know who's influencing their politicians. It's not unreasonable for people to give money to political parties, and it's not unreasonable for them to expect that the party will do the sorts of things that it claims it's going to do. You give the money so that they will do what you think is right.
It can also open up that broader context as well, because we know that political parties kind of live and die by some of those big checks that come in the mail as well. For example, unions, generally speaking, traditionally have backed Labor, and a lot of business community backs Liberal, generally speaking.
Yeah, generally speaking, but it's not as clear-cut as that anymore. Things have changed quite dramatically in the past 100 years. The union movement generally, with its affiliation with the Labor Party, gives quite a bit of money. But, for example, a prominent union in Victoria gave less money to the Labor Party than it did to the Greens.
Which is a bit of a shift, isn't it?
Yes, and in Queensland, a different union, a smaller union, but still affiliated with the Labor Party in many ways, it also gave a donation of about $25,000 to the Katter Australia Party. Part of the reason that entities give money is that they are wanting to influence the party in certain policy directions. The very difficult line that sometimes gets crossed is that the donation becomes one of, I've given you this money, now I expect you to do what I want, not necessarily what is in the general public interest according to democratic processes.
That is the line in the sand, which is so hard to determine, because like you said, if you or I go out and put $100 for a political party, we're giving them the money because we believe that what they will do is for the good or for our political beliefs. But when those amounts get higher and higher and higher, is it a case of, well, we're buying your vote or your political will?
There are probably a number of instances, and I won't detail them all here, but you can go onto the Electoral Commission website and find bits and pieces that identify particular donors with particular outcomes. And yes, it gets really difficult or grey when a given entity gives a significant amount of money for a particular outcome that benefits them, their company, their organisation personally, and it's not just simply something that would be consistent with the party's general philosophy and general policy goals.
Very much so. Well, we will watch it with great interest, and of course it comes up every now and then, Jim. And my final question for you, I'm about to start a political party myself. Have you got a spare 100,000?
No.
The
check's in the mail, Mark.
The check's in the mail, and then we'll blame Australia Post when it doesn't arrive. Thanks, Jim. We'll talk about that off air a little bit later, and we'll catch you next week here at 2NURFM.
My pleasure, Mark.
103.7.